Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Advanced Podcast. I'm your host, Vikas Pota. Our guest today is someone who is challenging many of the usual ways we think about education. Leticia Lyle is an educator, systems thinker, and social entrepreneur with a deep commitment to reimagining how schools nurture human potential. She's the founder and chief education officer of Chase Growth Education, a K-12 organization that acquires, supports, and grows innovative schools across the world. Her specific leadership at Camino School in Brazil, which was recognized as a finalist of the World's Best School Prize, has shaped much of her work at the intersection of pedagogy, complexity science, and systemic change. Leticia's approach brings together ideas from education philosophy, neuroscience, and complexity theory. She has developed frameworks that blend social emotional learning, metacognition, universal design for learning, and expedition-based curriculum design. Her goal is to build learning environments that are adaptive, student-centered, and truly human. Her school, an exemplar of her philosophy, the Camino School, is an independent trilingual school in São Paulo, Brazil. It's empowering students to reach their full potential with a curriculum that connects with students on a human level, integrates social emotional development, and uses active methodologies. It nurtures well-rounded individuals who are equipped to take on the world. Camino School was founded in 2020 with the main objective of preparing students for the real world. And in this, it differs widely from the country's traditional teacher-led approach while still following the Brazilian National Common Core curriculum. The school's project-based methodologies transform traditional classes into unforgettable learning experiences through expeditions. Students ask questions, present their ideas, experiment, and share their difficulties to solve problems. This active learning approach supports and encourages students to reach their full potential. At the same time, the integration of social emotional development into the curriculum contextualizes students' cognitive, social, emotional, and ethical abilities, an approach that helps students develop into well-rounded individuals who can transfer their knowledge to real-life situations. For example, the curriculum is taught in 3 languages, Portuguese, Spanish, and English, providing students with greater cognitive, cultural, and future economic opportunities. Of foundational importance was affordability, accessibility, and diversity, so as to showcase its model across Brazilian society and show other schools that they too could adopt and succeed with Camino School's approach. Leticia's work spans the classroom and beyond. She has taught, trained teachers, and worked with school networks. She also collaborates with ministries of education, international partners, and other thought leaders on projects that include inclusive education, leadership development, and global exchange programs. It's a real privilege to have her on the podcast today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Leticia Lyle. I'm really pleased that Leticia Lyle from Camino and Chase Growth in Brazil is joining us. Leticia is someone I've known for a long time, as I mentioned in my introduction, and someone I think of very highly. Leticia has also has been very supportive of everything I've done, but more importantly, her school Camino was shortlisted in the World's Best School Prizes as well a couple of years ago for the innovation category for what she'd done. I've had the honor of actually visiting Camino School. And before we get into the conversation about Camino School, Leticia, I thought what we should do is talk about Brazil and talk about the education situation in Brazil first, and then put the context together for everyone to understand why you do what you do. And so give everyone kind of the lay of the land, as it were, as to Brazilian education.
That is a very short question and dense. But hi, everyone. Vikas, thank you for inviting me. This is an awesome podcast. I'm an avid listener, and it's great that we have this space that we can share. It's a mixed vision of not only the business side, the market side, but a lot of the education and the tendency. So I feel very honored. Let's see. So for all of you folks out there, Brazil is a very large country, and we have most of our students are in the public school system. It's very wide. We have districts states, cities, municipalities, the federal government. And the students go through that journey from early years through high school in different, sometimes in different curriculum structures. So it's a very complicated system, and it's continental, different than other maybe countries that are as large, that have a lot of independence within maybe provinces. Brazil is one country, one language. We don't have dialects. We have a very large country, so it's hard to manage the distances. Sometimes it's harder to get from São Paulo to Manaus than it is to get to most countries in Latin America. But so there are a lot of complications. Together with that, Brazil is a developing country. So there's a lot of hardships from infrastructure, from professional development, things that you see everywhere that are exponential over here. So trying to do systemic changes in Brazil in education is very, very challenging. So anyone that is trying to do that deserves our support, because it is challenging. It's also extremely necessary. Brazil was one of the last countries to have universal education for everyone, to make it mandatory that you finish high school. And at the same time, it is a birthing nation for a lot of the very innovative pedagogies. In Brazil, this is where Paulo Freire comes from, and a lot of the constructivism is coming from experiences here. So there is that tension in Brazil between the innovation, that Brazilians are very connected, and I'll get to the place where I think Brazil can contribute to that education discussion. But also with the size, just the sheer amount of people. The state of São Paulo has 5 million students. So when you get that compared, and that's one state in a country. That being said, we also have about 30% of students that are in Brazil going into the private schools. Private schools are very widespread. They range from schools that are just closer to your house, but they're not expensive at all. They're very low cost. They were, usually created by mom and dad, and they are started as daycares, and they exist. Again, just the size of Brazil, there was the need of schools in a lot of places, to very high end, extremely amazing premium schools, and students are everywhere in that spectrum. Brazilian private schools have had a chance of sometimes being more innovative than the public schools, just because of the things that you can choose that are within the hands of the people that founded and the managers. So this is just the scenario, I think, is to say that there is a conversation in Brazil that is different than other countries, especially maybe in Europe or in the United States, where the private schools are usually connected and helping as a push for innovation. Again, sizes, and there's a lot of participation. So there's a lot of cross experiences. So there will be schools that will be creating and developing curriculum and materials that eventually can be taken to the public sector and larger scale. So that cross-pollination happens a lot. It happens between the teachers, and it happens between what the schools do. There is a phenomenon in Brazil, which is there's a lot of structured materials. We call them sistemas. There's sistemas de ensino are just very structured materials that a lot of the private schools will use, and some of the public schools will also use that system. They're very high quality. They're produced by amazing educators, and that's used across the country. The government has a way of purchasing that. So we have, sometimes the same materials that a public school is using, a private school is using as well. We call it a phenomenon because it is the main way that schools find the content and distribute. So that is one of the main sources of innovation or not innovating in Brazil. And I think a lot of other countries can look at our experience and see what are the things from that experience that they can take and what are the things that they find tricky. We have the same challenges everybody does with teachers. We have the same. Where are our teachers? Because we need to make a case about this. But teachers, we have the same issues with technology, with mental health, with where we're going with how are we helping our teenagers? How are we preparing them for a life in a digital world? And I think what we can contribute then to the rest of the world with that discussion is that probably because of the cultural roots and the way that pedagogy developed in Brazil, we're very focused on relationship and student well-being and looking at the human at the center. So it was easier for us in Brazil to start discussing the importance of social emotional learning than maybe it is in other places, because we see it, because it is a relational and relationship culture, and schools have always been seen like that. I think as the world moves to a more technological, and sometimes maybe we'll need to figure out different things to do with our time and needing to look at the human development in the center. Some of the experiences in Brazil will be able to show us all, as the world changes, ways that we can go back to that essential human being and that essential connection.
Thanks for providing that overview, Leticia. And there was a lot of things there to unpack, actually. And I have lots of questions about public education in Brazil as an example. But tell me, in terms of why did you arrive at the point that you are, which is in setting up a school from scratch? And what has been your vision for it? Just introduce what you tried to do in your school in São Paulo.
As an educator, I was always connected to that quest of understanding how humans learn. And I was very fortunate during my education to connect with what was the beginning of the research in social emotional learning and how that impacted especially our learning and our cognitive and non-cognitive skills. And when I started working at schools, and I just kept looking, I was like, where is the social emotional going here? And I realized that a lot of that was just being done in the sides. I think I built my entire career. So even, the past 15 years, I've been testing out different places where that the social emotional learning component was going to be like. So I first started working with children with learning disabilities, specifically trying to understand how we could ensure that they were included in schools. And then I realized that, maybe we needed a program that would help the entire school understand that was important. So then that's what I went to do. I started a very large program in the state of São Paulo, and I built the curriculum. And I was in that for a few years. And then I realized that was great, but we also needed a systemic change because nowhere in the national curriculum was social emotional learning. So then I went to work in a bigger organization and tried to influence curriculum and how we structure. Brazil was then able to change our national curriculum to include the SEL. And then I realized that even with all of the systemic changes, schools also didn't know how to put the student, and not only the student, but learning in the center of the process, which is really important. So I think the Camino journey starts there. Camino means path. It's the way. And it has this name because of a poem by Antonio Machado that says, Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar. And it says, basically, your path is not ready. You make it as you go. And as a metaphor for education, I think that that's a very important one. I wanted to develop a methodology, not just a school. I wanted to make sure that I created a school that could show that schools could actually put social emotional learning and the human learning at the center, and that it's not something that's going to take away from your cognitive development. It's not going to take away from anything. It's just going to make you a better, more complete and happier and healthier individual. So we started Camino School we were very lucky to be starting a startup, but with already some backbone of a very experienced team. I had been running 40 schools at Somo, so it was a big project, a lot of energy put into one little space. But I knew that this is for sure, that there were a few things that few schools have a chance of doing, either because they didn't have the whole journey where they saw the entire system before they started, or because they don't have the resources because it's expensive. But we wanted to make sure that we developed a curriculum and a structure that allowed us to collaborate. I'll give an example. A lot of times we say a school needs to collaborate and we say we want to do active learning, except the entire furniture of the whole school is bolted to the floor. That happens because this is how we did, 30 years ago, and nobody thought of unbolting them. And it's not bad. It's just, then you try to do that and you can't because, you could be a teacher, you could be a principal trying to implement and the infrastructure is not answering. Or it could be the other way around. You have all this amazing furniture, but your curriculum just says that you have to have lessons that are very structured and that are just, a teacher talking and the students copy. I mean, you're not going to be able to do that if that part is not taken care of. The other thing is resources. If you don't plan from the start how the math is going to happen, how is your P&L going to pay for that? Because yes, if you're going to give more attention, put more differentiation, the ratio of student teacher is going to be different. So you have to put that into account ahead of time. Otherwise, your model at one point, it's not going to sustain itself. And then you're going to have to put a bunch of students and you're not going to have all of that. So I think that the privilege I had was that I had gone through that whole process and I was able to start and create a structure at Camino School that would answer to those things so that we could put learning in the center. Together with that, with my background and my partner's backgrounds in technology, we already knew that we had to, in order to maintain that, we knew we had to invest in technology coming from the ground. It's very different because we had our platform today. We had developers that stayed at school working as teachers for a whole year before they started programming. And the reason is, having come from an ed tech environment, a lot of times we have great ideas, but the truth is the issues are in the details. The issues are in how and when is a teacher going to use that. So at Camino School, we had a chance of developing all of that at once. And I think that what we have now been able to do and are being able to share, and that's why Chase now exists, is that we were able to create something that other schools can use as a structure and as a support to take their schools into this next phase of education, the phase where AI is there, where we finally say, content is everywhere. How do we develop the brain? How do we develop the brain in this world where the teens are disengaged, like Rebecca Winthrop says? So I think that we were able to do that, and it's a really neat experience, and it's a cool school. And we were able to include.
Yeah, Leticia, I see a whole generation of folks like you who are educators that often think about, I want my own school. What is the step from that thought to actually having your own school? What are the 2 or 3 things that are quite important for them to do?
I think the first thing and the most important thing is you have to have your north. You have to know where you want to get to. And that's usually translated in your principles. The reason I'm saying that is when you're creating something and you're creating something complex, you need something that's going to set order to the system. And usually these are your foundational principles. So if it takes time for you to develop that, or if it's an intuition, it doesn't matter. You have to keep to them. You can't change your principles halfway through. Here at Camino School, we knew from day 0 that we wanted to work with 3 large scopes. We wanted to work with the totality of human experience. We wanted to work with the centrality of relations and how we build that. And we wanted to work with the individual authorship of each individual and how they can change the world and how they can be their own versions. That we translated into the basis of what our curriculum development used as guidelines. We use it to decorate our walls. We say we're kind, we're learners, we are the school and it looks like us. And this is what everybody knows. The reason why this is important is because a lot of times the way that we do things will change as the world changes. As you know, we started the school because we opened the school and then 10 days later we were closed for the pandemic. So we had a lot of things ready that we had to immediately change. And that is normal. Schools will go through that as we change. You have to be able to not have all the answers, but have great questions. What you cannot change is that north, is where you're going to, because that's how your school is going to tell its story for the rest of their lives. So that's the first thing. The second is you need to do the math. I think it's sometimes we start a school and the phases and the sizes that a school goes through are very different. So because it's usually a factor of number of students that you have in, they're usually their thresholds. You know, if you have 5 students, then you can pay for your bill. If you have 10 students, then you have excess and you can invest. The problem is a lot of educators or dreamers or even people that are business people, they go into the mathematics of developing a school. And that part is a different math. So I think sitting down, planning, the finance specifically, making sure that you have checks and balances and controls. A lot of times young educators like me, will start a school and we haven't done all the math, but you see that you can do it. The problem is when you don't have, because it's a factor of 1 student, 2 students, 3 students. When you don't have those students, then the model might suffer. So that's one thing that I think I learned.
No, I think it's a really great illustration of how you get things off the ground and how you've approached it. But you've gone very quickly from establishing a school to being a very high performing school. And so congratulations on that. But do you want to also talk through in terms of our particular focus on this podcast is on driving high performance? Because I just think we need more high performing schools around the world. And so tell us about your 3 things, 3 steps that you would encourage people to take to drive high performance on the basis of your experience.
So I think my first one is have a learner mindset. This is kind of like what I was saying is if you think you have all the answers, you're in the wrong business. You have to, and I say this because I used to say this to the parents. I would be like, look, I know you're bringing your kid here. I do not have all the answers. I do have great questions and a capacity of adapting and learning. And I will say, I'm sorry when I can't do it and I'll move fast. So this is something I had to bring to my entire team, because a lot of educators, I did, no, this has to be right. We talk a lot about the growth mindset, but a lot of educators are very fixed because, we want to do it right. We want to make it right. The truth is, sometimes people are scared of telling parents and other educators that they don't know yet. But that's the most important thing that we've done to gather the whole community around our project. Because the truth is, we know, it's a new school. Nobody is being fooled. The learner mindset is essential. It's one of our main things is we are learners. I will not, and that's a learner mindset that needs to go to the entire organization. I'll give you just a quick example is, I cannot, as a manager, as a school principal, punish, am I still here? Yeah, sorry. Punish people for mistakes, just mistakes, because then I'm saying something different than what I'm saying. What we do say is, if you're not trying, if you're deliberately giving up, or if you're hiding something, that's a problem. But if you make a mistake, this is a part of our learning. It's not just your learning, it's our learning. And this is something that I had a head of operations once, and that was not his mindset. And then he came to me and he's like, this lady let this person in and this is not okay, and I'm going to fire her. And I was like, oh, wait, I'm firing you. Because the problem is, if you don't keep the learning open, you do not grow. So that's number one. The moment you start not valuing the people that take risks, you're not going to build something fast, and you're not going to build something great, because you need that mistake going on. I think the second, and I'm going to use a term here that we use a lot, is the balance between the infinite and the finite games. I think that's an expression that has been around, but the way I see it is, the finite games are, it's a chessboard you play. There are a lot of complicated things, but the rules are there and they're set. And the infinite games is falling in love, is the relationships and how that goes. Education is absolutely those two things. A lot of times educators tend to think that we are only in the infinite game. So we're only allowed, you have to make excuse. You have to find time and money to do this because this is essential for this relationship, for this student. It's true. But there's also a balance. There's maybe we'll have to set some rules. We'll set some ground experiences. And finite and infinite games are balances that happen in the pedagogical level, in the economical level. They happen everywhere. I think I was very lucky because before I started Camino, I had a chance to dive into complexity theory and studying human system dynamics. And I even spent like a month with Humberto Maturana in Chile. So I think I was just like, that just opened my world to understand that, okay, so first I need to frame what are my finite and my infinite games. You need revenue. You need to make sure that you have goals. You need to have certain processes that if you do not have, you are not going to have great infinite games. You also need the flexibility and the ability to look at the human there, because sometimes falling in love doesn't look exactly like we want it to look like. That balance is something that requires space to plan and to talk about. We call these, the way that we did it here, we did it in cycles that we call adaptive action cycles that are, again, very fast cycles of caring for problems. So what is the issue? Naming, so what? Asking questions about why really is that a problem? And then a now what phase. And this is how we managed our whole organization, basically, even with the goals and the strategic projects, and we have all of that. But the fact is the way that we consider this cycle fast has allowed us to change, like you said, because it is, I have to say, it is really fast. What Camino has achieved, I've again have experience with a lot of other schools. I think a lot of it, we give it to the understanding that there are finite and there are infinite games in a school, in an education program, and that you need to have ways of contemplating those two things. If you go too much to one side, you are not going to have the connection with families, with educators. If you go too much to the other side, you're not going to have performance. You're not going to be able to have prediction or previsibility of what's going on. There's one more thing, and this is probably, it has to do with the other two, but there's I don't even know who said that, but somebody said it, and I took it as a life motto, which is nobody listens when they are not feeling seen. Isn't that crazy? Like if you're not feeling seen, everything else, like you can have the best benefit program, you can have the best education program, you can have the best teachers, you can have the best everything. If the person there is not feeling like she is a part of it, that she is respected, that she is seen, no matter, the connection will not happen. And this, for me, has been essential. That our organization grew. We have, 150 people here. But from the first day, every semester, I open a time in my planner to talk to every single person of my organization with an open mic. So they come into my room, from the doorman to the people in the kitchen to the coordinators. They can come in, and it's a complete open space. And it's just for me to hear them, so they can see that I can see them. And a lot of times I can't do anything about a lot of the things, but they are being heard. That is everywhere. If you have students that are being too rowdy, you need to see them.
I think these are really powerful lessons that you have outlined in terms of to drive high performance. I loved your first, which was around, and your second, actually, which was very profound, around finite and infinite games, and modalities. And the last one was really, really, really profound again, which is around, you have to see your people, in order for them to feel valued, respected, and to form a connection with them. They're not just numbers, they're not just policies, and you have to do that. Leticia, I want to ask you one more question, which is more to do with the linkage between your school and, say, private schools in Brazil and public education in particular, because I know that's a subject that you touched on as well in this interview. As per my knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, if I look at public education in Brazil, something like, if there was a ranking of the top 100 schools in Brazil, in the public system, something like 70% would come from the state of Ceará. This is what I'm led to believe. And so why is that phenomenon taking place?
Ceará is a case to study. So I've been to a few of the cities. I've been to Sobral a few times. So Sobral, for the people who do not know, is a city that went from basically not being anywhere seen in education to being not only the top performer, but the continuous top performer in the Brazilian national assessments. What happened in the state, and Ceará is the state. The state is a big state. It's not a very rich state. It's in the northeast of Brazil. But there was the first time was the mix of very competent people in education that were looking at education from a systemic point of view with political will. that's very important. That alignment is essential. And the particularity in Brazil is that the secretaries of education, they're not elected, they're appointed. They're appointed by the mayors or the governors or the president. That's an appointed cycle that happens, that if you are every 4 years changing government, either changing the parties or changing the people there, those people change as well. So it was always very hard for Brazil until we started having more longer cycles with re-elections that started in the mid-90s to continue education policies, because we have the national documents, but the people changed. So there were a lot of different initiatives. Ceará, and especially Sobral, was able to, for a confluence, and that started with Sobral, of government, the will of doing it with people who knew how to do it. People that were not just coming from education, that were coming from understanding how to implement large scale, systemic changes. So that I think is the first condition. It's so important, especially in a country that changes so much the leadership within the education programs. The second, and this is all a merit of the people that were there, was a really step-by-step investment in teachers, in materials, in infrastructure, and in increasing a lot of the time that the students stay in school, making sure that all of this, the education maximums that we think are essential, them making sure that that was happening. But it required a lot of alignment. I will say though, because that even if another city had the same alignment and everything, what they did in Sobral is really remarkable. So there is a credit to the people that were running this. And now they're influencing the rest of the country, because as their experience spreads out and they continue to have great results, we have more of that philosophy coming into the Brazilian public schools. But yes, so it's very remarkable.
You provided us with an incredible view of Brazil firstly, and what happens in Brazil. We've talked about the features of public education. We've talked about high performance in a public education system, as is evidenced in places like Ceará and Sobral. But we've also talked about your vision and philosophy in education, and the emphasis on social emotional learning, student-centered pedagogies, and active learning. And you also shared with us, how you've gone from being a relative new startup to such a high-performing school in such a rapid period of time. Leticia, we congratulate you and thank you for everything that you do. If only we could clone you and have you around the world. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Come visit me in Brazil. It's a lovely place. And thank you again, Vikas, and everyone at T4 for making this amazing organization where we can share.
I want to thank Leticia for this deeply inspiring conversation and for sharing her journey and wisdom with us. Out of the many brilliant ideas shared by her, these are my key takeaways from the conversation that are focused on high performance. So the first is to have a learner mindset. The second is, understand the balance between finite and infinite games, especially complex systems and simple rules. And the third thing, which I thought was immensely powerful, from her own experiences, no one's going to listen to you if they're not feeling seen. So the idea of connection. If Leticia's words gave you something to think about, please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're using and share this episode with a friend who cares about education. It's one simple way to invite more voices into the conversation. Thanks for being here, and I look forward to our next conversation on the Advanced Podcast.